Okay, I am in my newly finished glass studio and I'm about to work on my first glass project. I haven't fired the kiln in over 6 weeks, so I'm super eager. In the meantime, while I was working on my renovation, I had a great friend who has been also a great customer reach out, and she asked for a commission. She wanted 2 platters. And what we agreed to, there were some colors that she wanted, and I kind of knew her style based on some previous work. And so anyway, what we agreed to is to do platters that had the stringers that are kind of melted down the middle. It's a relatively easy project. So I'm gonna dive in and do mine, and I'm gonna start by cutting the glass. She wants 2 large 16 by 16 platters. So I'm gonna put these on pure white background. So I've got Tekta white that I like to use, and I've got some clear so I can make 2 layers. I'm gonna have to do this in multiple firings because my kiln's not big enough to get 2 pieces that large in at the same time. But let's go ahead and start by cutting my glass. Okay, 2 notes here, and then I got to keep cutting. So first, I'm glad I double checked my mold. You may have seen me do that. In my head, I had that it was 16 by 16. It's not. It's 15 and a half by 15 and a half. So I had to change my measurements on the glass. So I'm glad I checked that. However, what I forgot to check, and so fatal error here. So this is just a tip for everybody. Not fatal, I'll fix it. But in all of the moving around of this glass studio and this cutting table and everything, I messed my ruler up. So I assumed it was measuring correctly, and it was not. So now I've got to see if I can trim these glass pieces down, which is hard because these are large pieces, and I'm just going to trim about 1/2 inch off of each side. So hopefully I get nice clean breaks. What I'm wrestling with in my head is, do I just keep these? In fact, I might just do that. I might just keep these, use them for other pieces. I've got plenty of white and clear Tekta. I'm privileged that way, I guess. So maybe I just go through and make brand new clean cuts, and I keep these larger sheets and scrap for another time versus risking shattering it. That's what I'm gonna do. Okay, now I'm gonna cut fully new ones. Okay, so I recut my glass, and now I have a lot of other larger scrap pieces to use for other projects. That's okay, it'll get used. But I've recut the glass. Now I've cut papyrus down to size for my kiln, and I'm going to clean up my first 15 and a half by 15 and a half piece. I'm gonna clean that up really well. I want the white on top of the platter with the Tekta the clear Tekta underneath. So I'm gonna clean everything up. I'm gonna put the clear Tekta down. I'm gonna dust glass powder, clear powder over it to try to eliminate some bubbles. Not too much, and I'm not too worried about bubbles, but just a little bit for, I don't know, good hygiene. Obviously, mask up when you do something like that. I just use plain old clear powder, and I have a sifter that I have dedicated for clear powder so that I don't accidentally contaminate anything. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that done, and then I'll show you what I'm doing with the stringers. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the actual design of these platters. So if you're on Facebook, this is nothing new. You've seen these a million times. Laurie Spray has something on her website. In fact, I'll put a link to that at the bottom in the video notes that talks about this process, which is essentially lining up some stringers in your kiln on some kiln paper. So you're not putting them on glass, you're putting them just right on paper. And when you line them up in a straight line, take them to a full fuse, they pull apart in some areas and fuse together in other areas and make this really cool organic shape. So here's a picture of an example that's on Laurie's website. And so what I've talked about with my friend is these two giant white platters. We've narrowed down some colors based on her color scheme that she has. And these are the 6 that she chose. And then she asked me a question that was a really interesting experimental question. So follow along in this and we're gonna see if it works and how it works. She wanted to know if I could put a little bit of silver in there. And she said, it's absolutely not required, but if there's just highlights of silver, that would be cool. And I immediately thought, Bullseye, steel blue. So what I explained to her is that this steel blue can be a little bit temperamental and somewhat unpredictable, at least in my experience. But that I would put a couple of strips of this, or a couple of stringers among the color palette here, just a few, and then we will see kind of what happens. I would imagine, this is my hypothesis, on first firing full fuse to just create the stringer component, that project piece, that it'll turn silver. But then that stringer component needs to get fused onto the platter itself. And so that's another full fuse. And so does that silver stay? Does it reverse itself? Does it go back to blue? And then the third firing will end up being the slump of the platter itself at a much lower temperature. What will happen to the blue at the slump temperature? Will the steel reverse or will it stay? And so I told her that I was happy to experiment with it. However, she had to be okay with this color as part of the palette, even if it was just 1 or 2 in there, in order to just recognize that when we open the kiln for the final, after the final slump, it may go back to blue. And she said, I'm in. So as an experiment, we're gonna try that. So I'm going to cut these down because I only want them to be, I don't know, I gotta think about it, probably only about 14 inches long. These are on average about 18. So I need to trim these up. I'm gonna lay them out on the shelf. I'll show you what that layup looks like in just a moment. Okay, so the 2 different platters, she did not want exactly the same. She wanted one to have kind of an equal part of all the colors, and then the other one to lean heavier on teal and turquoise, well, yeah, teal and orange. And so I am counting out how many stringers. I've kind of made a little bit of math in terms of how many I'm gonna, worked it up in terms of how many I'm gonna include on each platter. And then I've now pulled out my stringers and I'm going to cut these. Now the way in which I'm gonna do this, I'm going to look at laying them all out flat as I can. It doesn't have to be precise, but I'm going for 14 inches. I don't know if you can see that. I think you can. Going for 14 inches here. I had read a tip. Now these are about the same height as my ruler here, but I had read a tip about using an eraser, and I found this giant kind of novelty eraser that would provide a little grip and allow you to kind of plant those so that they don't move on you. And so I'm going to do that actually a little bit closer down here to my cut line. And then I'm just going to use my scoring and try to score across these if this works. I've not done this before, so we're learning together. Not working. Just see if I can score them. I don't know that that really did anything. Let's see. Oops, well, one of them broke. Yeah, I don't really think, yeah, it did it a little bit. Yeah, not too bad. I'll get a little bit better as we go through these, I think. So there's my first set. Now I'm keeping all these cutoffs because I decided I was just going to use them and throw another little piece in and surprise her with a little freebie piece using all the colors. So I'll just do a little, you know, small little dish or something. So I'm just going to cut or keep all my little cutoffs and just a little plastic lid there. But there's my first batch. I'll get a little bit better at this as we go, but not too bad for my first run. All right, well, that went okay. I did not really get any better at it as I went. And then I decided at the end to get my handheld cutter to see if I could get a little bit better control. There's probably a much better way to do this. I really did not research it too much. You're probably watching this thinking, you fool, why didn't you just XYZ? But you know what, I did it my way and it worked, and I got all my stringers cut. And so here we are, this is my color scheme. So I'm going to go put these together in the kiln, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so as you saw, I just kind of mixed those up and laid them down. I tried to break up any significant pattern of stringers where there were too many in one color. She wanted this one to lean a little bit more orange and teal, and so that's a little heavier there. This one's got more balance, and then I took my stringers for the steel and just kind of worked them in between. So I'm going to take this up to a full fuse. You see this funny piece of papyrus here. I took a long skinny strip of papyrus, folded it in half, and stuck it in the middle, just in case these decide to roll or jump a little bit. I wanted to protect them a little bit in between. So I don't need to control my ramp too much on this. I'll take this up to about 1480 for 10 minutes or so. I'll double check that schedule and make a final decision. I always post my schedule in the video descriptions, but let's see what this looks like. No reason to even anneal. These will pull together. I will have to very carefully lift them off of here, clean the back, and then we'll put them on the full sheet for the platter fuse, and they'll be annealed in at that point. So let's fire this up and see what they look like when they come out. Okay, here are the finished pieces, all sorts of learnings that came out of this, and I'm basically starting over. So hang with me as the video will continue. But I didn't like mixing the colors. I totally didn't think about reactions. I don't know why, but some of these are copper bearing styles, others have sulfur and selenium in them, and so there were some reactions. So these just generally came out darker than I wanted. I don't think the client's gonna want this. We haven't actually talked. So I don't know, maybe she'll love it, but I'm thinking that I would be better not to mix the colors and instead do them as kind of color blocks, and make sure that I know which ones I'm placing next to the other so that they don't get too much of a reaction. I did take this to 1480 for 10 minutes. Okay, and now that I have to redo these anyway, I'm gonna show you my newest way to cut multiple stringers at once. I set up a stop here on my cutting grid to the exact length that I want, and that measures right out to the very edge of my cutting grid. So I'm gonna hold these carefully, just gonna do a light score right across the top, and then all I have to do is break them right off the end. And I've got exactly the size that I need. Okay, here's the next chapter. So the client liked the other stringer pieces that came out, but then she said, what if you did just kind of a random assortment, almost like pickup sticks for my second platter? So I'm gonna do what you saw the first time around for her original platter. She liked those colors and liked the way it turned out. And now I'm doing kind of pickup sticks style. So I truly just cut these. I drew a little frame on the thin fire. This time I'm switching to thin fire. So I wanna try thin fire instead of papyrus. I felt like the papyrus pulled up a little bit on some of those past stringers. Thin fire may tend to do the same. I'm also going to adjust my firing schedule down a little bit. I went to 1480 and I held for 10 minutes. I think I'm going to go down lower than that. I think I'm going to go down to about 1465. I ramped at 300. I'll probably do about the same. I don't know. I'll think about it a little bit. But basically, I've just cut a whole bunch of stringers. Now, I did go get some 2mm stringers. I had been working with 1mm. I'm very concerned about the fragility of this because I think, you know, it's gonna melt and it's gonna shrink in a little bit, but on the edges here, these are gonna be real fragile where it's just a single stringer. So I'm very nervous about whether or not this is gonna work, and I told her that, but I'm all about experimenting, and I'm sure you'd be fascinated to see how it goes. So I just truly kind of pick up stick style, randomly drop these all over the place. It's quite tall. So you can see the multiple layers of stringer, you know, that are in there. So that's obviously all going to settle down. One of my concerns is that this is going to shift a little bit, that these are going to roll as they start to melt, and so that could be catastrophe. So let's all hope that that doesn't happen, and I'll show you what this looks like when it comes out. Oh, holy cow. I was really nervous that I was going to break this, and I guess the night's not over yet, but I fired it, and nothing rolled, which is good, so it stayed within the footprint that I wanted it to. I fired it lower. I went down to 1465 and held for 5 minutes, and I fired it on thin fire. And generally, I'm happier with the results. I don't know if it's the thin fire or if it's the lower schedule or the combination of both. But it came off the thin fire relatively easily, although I'm still gonna complain. I mean, thin fire is just a mess, people. It just goes everywhere. It instantly turns to powder and goes everywhere. And I've heard some people say if you're careful with it, you can get another firing out of it. I don't see it. I'm gonna be a papyrus guy long term. But for this project, for this particular firing, thin fire worked. So I have this sheet pan here that I filled with water. Not filled, but put enough water in that I could submerge this piece once it was cool. And this is the bottom side of it. So I'm just, delicately running my hands over it to make sure I've got all the thin fire off. And then I'm going to lift it carefully and allow it to air dry on these paper towels here. Before then I take it over to my kiln and put it on the sheets of glass. So I'll show you what that looks like once that's all done. All right, people, it's on there, and I didn't break any of those tiny little edges off. Whew, I'm so lucky. Okay, so there's a base of Tekta underneath, white glass on top. It's white Tekta actually. And then now this piece, and I'm going to go for a traditional full fuse in my kiln with a really nice long bubble squeeze, and we will see what this piece looks like tomorrow. Good night, little one. All right, here is this one out of the kiln. I did a nice full fuse on that. I'm very, very pleased with how this one turned out. And I've got the next one that we've got ready to rock and roll here. She wanted the stringers on half. I think that's gonna look super cool. So that one is ready to go. And then I had some of the stringers left over. So as I mentioned, I was just gonna do a little freebie piece for her. And so there's that one for her as well. So I'll show you these when they come out. Okay, both of these pieces are out of the kiln. She wanted the stringer on the left side of this, so half clear, half stringers, and it's probably not going to show up very well, but the silver came nicely. The colors are real nice, so I'm very pleased with the firing on both of these. Now on to the Slump. Okay, this is too hot to take out, but I've opened the kiln so it can continue to cool. So this is the second piece that I've fired, and over here is the first piece, and these are so large I don't have a way to photograph them upstairs in my little photo booth, so I've pinned some craft paper to my shelf up above, and I'm trying to kind of make a little makeshift photography booth out here in my garage. But that is the other one. I'm very, very pleased with how these turned out. I also made her just a little gift using the same kind of concept, but on some elephant gray. And so thought that would be a nice little pleasant surprise when she opens the kiln. Or excuse me, opens her package when she gets it. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed these. I learned some stuff as I made them. I hope you did as you watched it. Please subscribe to my videos and my channel for future projects. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.